Hello, my name is Myunghee Na from SK hynix. It's such a pleasure for me to be here today to talk about memory and storage with the system community. The topic today for me is not only breaking memory and storage, but breaking the boundary between compute, memory, and storage. And can we do that? Where we were in before, like a few years back, right? I think it's probably 10 years back, to be honest, is that memory was very clear. The role of memory is very clear. Memory hierarchy is very clear. What we are looking for in memory is very clear. So the boundary were very, very clear. Endurance and latency and cost, the capacity are the ones actually very important for memory, and we make a trade-off and deciding which one actually we want to go for memory in the system performance. Now, I think we know that heterogeneous computing is everywhere, and I think this community knows the most. So this is one of the examples of the heterogeneous computing. IBM Summit AI computer in Oak Ridge National Laboratory has tons of CPUs and GPUs in the one system, and they gotta work very seamlessly. And this is amazing, actually, the heterogeneous computing examples. There are a lot more of that, as we know. Not only that, heterogeneous accelerators, they are not uniform. There is FPGA form, there is ASIC form, there is a CPU and GPU forms of the accelerator. To make our life more complicated, heterogeneous technology is coming. In the memory landscape, with the 3D TSV DRAMs, using the TSV technologies, and SoC, in the disaggregated SoC, using actually for cost and the performance technologies, and it's coming very, very fast. So before what we actually thought is impossible is coming right now. To make life more interesting, that what we actually need the computing for, the growth is actually tremendously increasing as well. One of the examples is AI applications. AI application actually continues to push memory wall to the extreme. What you are actually seeing here is the year versus number of parameters in the AI model. The red is actually the growth of the AI model parameter trend. Wow, this is about 240x per 2 years. The model parameter is growing, while the AI hardware memory in the hardware in AI accelerator is growing about 2x. A lot of catch up to do, if even with a lot of system optimizations. So we are in a very interesting point that Moore's law is scaling down, technology scaling. However, the need is growing much faster than Moore's law. So it's really an important journey for us to all together come on table to talk about what we need to do to enable this. So these challenges are as well as opportunities. The memory bandwidth and memory capacity changes, actually challenges are providing a lot of opportunities for us to think differently. So what you're actually seeing is a socket bandwidth in the x-axis in the left-hand side, and the capacity is the y-axis on the right-hand side. Capacity is growing about 5x per next decade, and the bandwidth is growing at 8x. Not only that, as we discussed before, it needs to work process seamlessly in the different processors, different workload. It can be image processing, it can be audio processing, it can be a recommendation. All of this actually need to work seamlessly in this system with this kind of challenges and opportunities. So in the memory world, what does that mean? We need a coherent memory, we know that, and large capacity, and traditional values for low cost and high bandwidth. They all needed that as well. So this is a very interesting time for us to do technology in the memory actually technology company. So we all know this part a little bit, that actually technology itself is not enough to introduce new memory. In order for us to go next generation of the new memory systems and memory-centric computing, we need a new interface, a new technology, as well as new architecture. The system need to come with us in order to enable the new memory technology, and this is the hard lesson for as a memory the technologist. So where we are going is that we have much unclear boundary. Good or bad, I don't know, but we actually are seeing a lot of opportunities in there. So between the DRAM to cache, we have HBM, which actually placed in near processor. So that it actually enhanced the DRAM capability as well as cache. And between the DRAM to SCM, their boundaries blur, and SCM is getting faster, as well as actually DRAM is going into the much higher capacity. So as SCM to NAND. So interesting technology choices we all have. Not only technology innovation is important, the memory landscape is we talked about. Memory enablement ecosystem is really, really important. From workload to the material, we gotta think very holistically how to do technology introductions as innovation for system companies, as well as system community. Is really important matter for us to moving forward in new technology innovations. So now, I challenge all of us in this panel. We talked about next generation computing, but what does it really require for us to prepare for next generation computing? I think it's all of above. We need to go 3 steps. 1, you need to continue to heterogeneous computing, which means extending DRAM and NAND scaling further. And we gotta introduce new value memories, where there is a gap between the memory hierarchy. We explore new value memories. At the same time, combine all of this together, we gotta break the boundary between compute and memory and storage. Work as a one system, and that's really the grand vision of actually memory technology innovations. So let's briefly talk about the extending the DRAM and NAND further. Technology roadmap for the next 10 years is amazing. Actually, we are in the era that we never imagined to be here. We are talking about sub-10 nanometers in next 10 years of dimensions of DRAM, over 600 actually the stacks in the NAND. When in just a few years back, this is not possible. Now we are talking about these amazing dimensions and amazing scaling technologies. Of course, there are always challenges. The challenges are growing. So as actually our opportunities as technologies to innovate. So there are 3 steps overcoming DRAM challenges we are tackling at this point. This is one of the key 3 steps, but there are a lot more coming in the industry. One is lithography. You are talking about sub-10 nanometers. You gotta simplify the patterning process. EUV enables that. So multi-patterning to the single patterning of EUV to later on to multi-patterning in EUV is going to come as we're scaling further. But EUV is not just only patterning, it's the photoresist, material selections, mass defect, and the productivity. All of them combined in lithography engineering is really key for us to succeed for next generation. Cell capacitor, we want higher cap. Not easy in the smaller dimensions because it really requires a higher aspect ratio of the cap structures or higher K. So we gotta continue to do new material innovation to introduce a higher K as well as a higher aspect ratio of the patterning and the process integration. Since the device is so small and interconnect is not getting smaller, so having a low resistance metal is really important because it's all about parasitics. Having a beyond the tungsten metals to lower the resistance for bitline and the wordline resistance is going to be important. Again, it's a new material innovation. For technologies, material innovation is such a painful thing because it takes a really, really long time for us to do innovation in the material because it has a longer cycle time. But as we talk about here, now it's the era of the new material is needed and required. It's no longer option. So in this kind of era, it's actually pushing the technology to the farther to the left. Is really an exciting time as a technologist. NAND is all about stacking. So hard etch is really important, how to control the profile, throughputs, and the hard materials in order to do high aspect ratio patterning is really important. Continuing G-scaling is going to be a key for NAND. Since they are such a small dimensions as well as actually the much higher aspect ratio, all of the materials are ALD based. So very high quality ALD material process, and then still provide enough of cell current is going to be key. So cell dielectric is one of the areas we are focusing on. Since we are stacking so many layers, the stress is going to be eminent. How to monitor, how to evaluate the stress in the NAND system is going to be important. And looking at the new materials to enable the less stressed materials is going to be important as well. So these three areas we are focusing on in the overcoming NAND challenges. So NAND and DRAM is going happily, merrily, by itself, but that's not enough. We gotta do really something different. We need to do maximizing opportunity, learning from each other. DRAM to using our 3D NAND technologies, 3D NAND to the DRAM technologies, we maximize opportunities for better scalability and high capacity. So technology development will be synergetic, and that's actually you can bet on. Where we end up is not very clear. However, the technology cannot be separated to develop, and we gotta learn from each other, logic to memory, memory to logic as well. So I've talked about the new value of memory. We talked briefly about SCM. SCM is really enabling in my mind that new interfaces. New interfaces is a key because this is a critical part of introducing new hierarchy in the memory, especially for CXL. Memory as a memory buffer, which means high capacity continuous memories. It enables a lot of actually SCM features and the innovations in SCM landscape. So emerging memory no longer become emerging anymore. It's actually getting very exciting, right? Intel announced it actually produced a lot of 3D crosspoint for DIMM as well as SSD using Optane technologies. So in SK hynix, we actually do PCM technology development to enable the storage class memory solutions as well. So in storage class memory, we actually think about 5 different areas, and all of the materials need to meet this actually requirement. One is high density and low cost and low latency and endurance. This is a hard requirement that finding the right solutions for the material is going to be very important. Persistence is added value. If you can store and do the memory, that would be really exciting. But let's be honest, persistent SCM is a really important application in memory database. But the space of the applications and where we go next need to grow, and we like to really work with the system community to actually push that direction as well. So PCM-based 3D cross-point memory is promising for high capacity and persistent storage class memory, and we are excited to continue to do this development. Next, finally, about breaking the boundary between compute and memory and storage. Memory has been bottlenecked for so long. Actually, you can even talk about 70s and 80s as well. So memory bottleneck is not new. Why is it actually more becoming more problematic? Because we change, our society changes, we change, and our data set changes. We are going into much more data-centric computing, so the processor and memory, the bandwidth is much more strenuous. So now we are going into the era of that actually memory-bound system performance is much more pronounced. So we are talking about PIM, so processor near memory, or processor in memory, to relieve the bottleneck where the memory to the accelerator or memory to the CPU has actually causing a lot of traffics to have a much more streamlined traffics. So putting the processor close to the memory is really not a new concept. But now our landscape, our lifestyle demands this solution to be implemented much faster, and that's the interesting time for us to be here. Bringing memory and compute together is actually a really interesting journey in my mind. We started with very separated era to now HBM closer to CPU using a 2.5D technologies, and then processing near memory so that actually the memory can actually effectively transfer the data much faster and much more effectively and much more low energy as well. Now process in memory, not near memory, in memory. And now we're talking about not process, not simple process, we're talking about compute in memory and in a single die. What an amazing time we are in, right? One of the SIM concept, which is compute in memory, is analog in memory compute. And this is, we actually, a lot of people talk about this, a lot of people study about this. This is not only SK hynix we're doing it, actually a lot of companies and academia is doing that as well. Key interesting part of the MBM-based analog in memory is that it's much more simple. The DNN matrix of vector multiplication can be easily mapped in the architecture using MBM. Why? Because MAC can be done with a cross-point architecture. So within the cell architecture, it can be easily done by actually using the array structures. At the same time, MBM offers minimum data movement, which means you can store the weight in the MBM. And if you have multi-level, it's even better because you can store multi-weight. That opens up low power and high performance AI accelerator enabled by MBM-based AI accelerators. So this is really an exciting topic. And a lot of research is going on and a lot of actual debate is going on as well, right? So because it's the active area. So very interesting topic here. MBM is such a wide area. There are many, many MBMs. Among that, there are three key MBMs studied. One is MRAM, MPCM, and RM. What I want you to take the message here is that none of the MBMs are perfect for analog and memory compute. They are slightly fault, and they requires a lot of actual innovation. The innovation not only material solutions, but architecture and algorithm in order to enable analog and memory compute in an MBM. And this journey is continuing, and we are actively looking at this research area. So as a lot of academians, and I love to hear from a lot of people in this forum to talk about these topics as well. Now, one step further. We start with the memory and logic separate, and then we integrate into one package, memory and logic. That has been an exciting journey, right? Why do we stop there? We go one step further, or maybe two steps further. We make a system using the 3D technologies. Now 3D technology is enormously actually going fast and rapidly moving, and there is a lot of progress in there, including wafer-to-wafer hybrid bonding and chip-to-wafer bonding. So there are a lot of exciting technologies. Going in a system where memory and compute has no longer boundaries offers much higher value for the system performance as well as the functionality. This will be a very exciting time. We talked about a little bit of von Neumann computing, where heterogeneous computing is continuing, and then we are going in the post-von Neumann computing. I'm realist. I don't believe current architecture will stop. We will move into the heterogeneous architecture continuously. That means DRAM and NAND will continue to exist. The need is still there. But workload-specific actually computing requires different solutions to be effective, and that's where the post-von Neumann architecture will come. So we start with the segmentation era, which is a DRAM and NAND and CPU. They are all separate. You don't have to know each other. It's okay to not to know. Now we are in the era of convergence. Yeah, I think actually processors need to be pretty closer to the memory, and memory need to be closer to processors. So HBM, MPIM, and some of the SIM and the SCM as a second-tier memory is coming, and it has came. Now where we are going is actually, why not integrate it? Let's break the artificial boundary between memory and compute and storage. and integrate all together to make a better systems. And I think that's the really grand challenge for us and grand vision for us as a technologist to enable that, as a system, actually the architect, to help us to go moving forward that direction for better system performance. And I love to have a lot of good discussions on this topic, how to do this topic, to this actually the grand challenge. I'd like to thank everybody to make this presentation possible, and thanks for listening. I really appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to good discussions on this topic. Thank you.